Okay, so in this video, let's wrap up shot 2 by dealing with bringing in our depth pass and adding some depth of field to our shot. First thing I'm going to do is delete out the color correct cop that we had in place, and then I'll bring my visibility down to our layer. So we need to bring in our depth pass, so I'm going to push tab, create a file cop, enter, and enter to drop that in. And then I'm going to browse up to our renders folder, into shot 2, then into the depth folder, and I'm going to grab our depth underscore shot2.$f.pick.nc. If we bring our visibility down to the depth, we can see that if we switch over to look at the PZ channel, we can see our depth information for the shot. So we need to bring our depth information in so that we can merge that channel in so that we have this PZ channel for the rest of our branch of our network, since this is our image we want to work with, but we need that depth information so we can add the depth of field to that image. So to do that, I'm going to use a channel copy cop. So we create a channel copy, and the data that we wish to add the channel to is going to be our existing network. The data we want to take that new channel from is going to be our depth. So we wire our depth into the second input, our layer into the first. And on the channel copy, we can set the target to be a new plane. We want to create a new plane, and we can give that a name. We can choose from any of these drop downs. Unfortunately, PZ is not an option here, which is a little frustrating because we do need our depth to be named PZ. I'm going to choose just straight Z, and then we'll go ahead and rename with a rename cop directly after the channel copy. So I'm going to choose to create a new Z plane, and I want that to come from input 2's PZ. So input 2 PZ is going to be the PZ plane of this image, and on the output of this we're creating a new plane called Z that's taking that PZ information. So if we bring our attention down to the newly created Z channel, we have that PZ information. The reason it looks weird is because Houdini doesn't know how to deal with a Z channel. It knows how to deal with a PZ channel and will automatically set our brightness and contrast values accordingly. They've been set out to 111 when dealing with the Z channel, and that's caused our view to look like this. But if we right click on the output of the channel copy and create a rename cop, we can tell to rename our plane from the Z that we just created back to PZ. When we rename back to PZ, if I bring visibility up and back down, we can now switch over to PZ. We can see that it's automatically set the brightness and brightness adjustments so that we can see our depth information. And now that we have this plane named PZ, we can go ahead and use it to create depth of field. So I'm going to wire our rename into a depth of field cop. And the depth of field cop looks for a plane that is named capital P lowercase z. Anything else and it won't work with it. It is looking directly for this plane, which is why it was so important for us to come up here and rename our depth information to PZ. And what it's going to do is going to take this information, work with the parameters, and generate an M channel. And that M channel is a grayscale channel that allows us to then wire into a blur or a defocus and use this M channel to say I want certain areas, the areas that are going to be in white, to be blurred a lot, and certain areas, the areas that are in black, to not be blurred at all. So what we can do, we can change our focus distance, our depth adjuster, distance adjustment to alter our depth of field settings, and we'll see the effects that's having on the M channel. We can generate a depth of field with the focus in the right place and the fall off as we'd like. So what exactly do focus distance, depth adjust, and distance adjustment do? Well, focus distance is the distance from the camera where everything is in focus. Depth adjustment works like scaling our depth information. It controls the fall off. How far do we need to go from our focus distance before we're out of focus? How far do we need to come back from our focus distance? It's controlling that fall off. Distance adjustment is like taking each of the distance values in our image and adding or subtracting a constant value to that. So it's not affecting our fall off like with focus distance, it's rather shifting everything. So by combining all three of these parameters, and really it's more of an art than a science, it's about tweaking these values until we see the results we're after in the view, we can set up the depth of field as we'd like. Now we can see we're getting weird issues around the edge of our image. To conquer that, if we come over to the mask, we can tell it to use our alpha channel to mask out the depth of field. So I'm going to set the operation mask to our first input alpha channel, and that's going to get rid of the weird edges we were getting. Now currently, everything is really dark, but we can decrease our focus distance. Well, actually, let's increase our depth adjust to scale our depth values, and instantly we can see that that's increasing that scale, so as if it's almost as if this point was much further away than it actually was, and this point was much closer than it actually was, such that our focus range is now a lot smaller, a lot tighter, because the focus, say it was 10 units big before, that 10 units is now a lot smaller because we scaled up our distance values. So I'm going to change this and probably boost this up to around here, and then if we slide our focus distance, you can see that's pushing our focus further back into the scene or pulling our focus closer towards us. Now obviously I don't want a fall off that's quite that extreme for this shot, so I'm going to go with a depth adjust of 1.22, and I'm going to push our focus distance out until our character is totally in focus. So let's push that out to right around where our character would be in focus. So you see our character is almost black there, so our character's in focus. With that in place, we obviously want to animate over the range of our animation, so I do want to adjust this now so where our character starts. So let's push our focus back slightly further, and right around there our character is in focus. And I'm going to key our focus distance by Alt left clicking on it, and then I'm going to scrub until our character comes towards the front of our image. So here's the and he's going out of focus as he does that. You can see he'd be getting more and more blurred because this M channel is getting lighter and lighter. So right around here, I'm going to drop our focus distance back until the character ends up back in focus. And if we key that again, now over the course of the animation, the focus pull should pull with the character. It's leaving a little too early, so I'm going to change where we've got that initial keyframe. So really we needed the initial keyframe around 230, so I'm going to shift middle click on our focus distance to scope that parameter, H2 home up. I'm going to grab that keyframe and just bring that back around to our frame. So now if we scrub through our timeline, actually we don't need to leave until there, so 259, shift middle click, H to home up, let's grab our keyframe, move that to our current frame. So on 259 we're going to leave, and now our character is pretty much in focus for the entire time, so that's fantastic. So now that we've generated this M channel, we can go ahead and use this M channel to generate our defocusing or our blur. And we do have two options for doing this. We have a blur cop and we have a defocus cop. Both of these are perfectly valid solutions. The blur is going to give a quicker, it's basically computationally less expensive, it's quicker to calculate, but the end results aren't as aesthetically pleasing. The defocus works more similarly to the way that a camera actually does deal with depth of field and light getting split and bent and causing things to go out of focus, but it is computationally more expensive. So we can take a quick look at setting up for both of these cases, but I'm going to be using the defocus on this project. So we wire into a blur, and we can turn over to our color channel, and by default, if we were to blur, we're going to blur the entire image. However, we can come over to the mask, and we can tell the mask to use that M channel we generated. So we can say use our first input and grab the M channel for generating the mask. Now we do need to, when we do that, tell it that we're doing a per pixel blur. And because of that, it's because our mask isn't a constant value, it's a varying value over the pixels, so we need to tell it to evaluate for every pixel. So now that we've got our mask in play, we should be able to boost up our blur, and it's hard to see, but let's bypass and then re-enable. You can just see the blur affecting here. You have to recall that our M channel has very slight variations in shade. Maybe that'd be more evident if we push that back to here and as we come forwards. But of course our M channel does have very small variations in shade. So if you wanted to set up a blur to do depth of field, that would be how you go about doing it. Make sure that you set the operation mask to the M channel. Make sure you check per pixel blur so that we do evaluate for every pixel in our image, and then just play with the blur size amount. Defocus is actually going to work in an incredibly similar way. So we wire in our defocus, but you can already see that it's much more like a camera going out of focus. The light areas get very much bleached out, and basically the light is almost like getting split and expanded. So we do need to switch over to the mask, tell it to use our first input and the M channel, again, for masking. And we do need to tell it to do a per pixel defocus so that it evaluates on every single pixel. And we can take this and we can boost our defocus up. And if we boost it up really far, we can see that this is out of focus here, and that our character is in focus. As we do that focus pull, our character's in focus, but now the background's out of focus. A defocus of 100 really is extreme here. I want something quite subtle, since really this distance is very short and we wouldn't have such a tight focus on a real camera. So I'm probably going to leave this at around 10. So it's just a very subtle defocusing. We're going to see in the other shots that we can use defocus to differentiate between our set and the audience, and it's going to be a lot more important in those shots. In this shot, a subtle amount of defocus will actually add a lot more than a strong amount of defocus in terms of the end result. So now you've seen how we can set up depth of field by bringing in our depth of field pass, making sure that that pass then becomes a channel within our existing image, and then we can use a depth of field cop to work with the PZ channel and generate a new channel, the M channel, that basically describes how we're going to mask a blur or a defocus. And then we've wired into a defocus, told the defocus to use the M channel to control how much defocus it's using. And then we're saying we're doing a per pixel defocus, which makes sure that we evaluate on every single pixel. So with that, we set up the depth of field, so we're pretty much there for shot 2, so we can go ahead and get this shot rendered out. To render out, I'm going to wire our defocus into a ROP file output cop, and this allows us to take a branch of a network and render out that branch of the network. So I'm going to render a frame range, and I'm going to render from 219 to 300, and I'm going to set our output picture. I'm going to jump up, and inside our shot 2 folder, I'm going to create a new folder called something like
Final.
Yeah, Final. And jump inside the Final folder, and let's create an image sequence called shot02 underscore final comp dot $f3 dot pic, and we can accept that. So we are going to be exporting both our color and our alpha. I'm happy to export both of those. We are therefore going to lose our position Z and M channels, but we don't need those anymore because of the fact that we're done doing any of our depth of field and defocus. We're happy to finalize this shot, and we just want to work with the final image data from this shot. So with that set up, all we now need to do is click on the render button. Clicking on the render button will cook this network for every frame in our frame range and save out the final image. So we'll go ahead and get that done off camera, but with that, that's going to conclude compositing shot 2. Thanks a lot.